Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 406 of Humanity Rising on this fourth day of February. Today, we want to delve into the internet. You know, most of us by now, even though the internet has not been around for very long in terms of the scope of human history, most of us take the internet completely for granted. We send emails, we're on social media, we can access information in real time from almost anywhere in the world. We can talk with people anywhere at any time about virtually anything. Social media has revolutionized human relationships, expanded the capacity of human community, and altered and transformed our world. And most of us have become, I would say, impatient with anything in the internet that just doesn't work the first time completely well. If there's a glitch, we become impatient. Even here on Zoom, we broadcast globally to people in 130 plus countries. And when something starts to warble, we think, "Whoa, what's this?" And we make demands that the companies that control the internet are continuing to respond to. And first we had 2G, and then we had 3G, and then we had 4G. And with each G coming in, there's more capacity. And at the same time, now that we're beginning to implement 5G all over the world, there's the serious pushback by scientists and doctors that are saying, wait a minute, these electromagnetic pulses and fields are doing serious damage to the human body and impairing human health. So that's our subject today. And we'll be diving into that with someone who probably knows more about 5G in terms of the health effects than anyone, at least that I personally know. But we'll get to Gary Knoll in a moment. In the meantime, let us pause and just take a moment to center ourselves in our bodies. It's our bodies that feel the effect of the electromagnetic force fields that are emitted by our cell phones, our computers, the power lines. It's our bodies. Center yourself on your heart. And for the next minute, in the midst of all that's besetting us, let us just listen to our heartbeat and feel one another on this day, and feel community, and feel the health that comes through the common beating of the heart. Thank you, everyone. As synchronicity would have it, since we're talking about the internet and 5G, Gary Knoll has not shown up yet. I think because he's having technical difficulties getting through. And so I will speak a little bit about this matter, hoping that Gary will be able to fix whatever it is that is inhibiting him from joining the program. And to say, as we contemplate modern technology upon which we have become so reliant, we expect much from technology, and technology always exacts a price. And what Gary was going to be sharing today is the price that we're paying in terms of human health for the technology that we are embracing. And you may have heard over the last several weeks as AT&T and Verizon were implementing 5G across the country, close to airports, which are close to all the big urban centers. 90% of the US public lives in urban centers. So the 5G that serves the urban centers is close to the airports, and the airlines, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, American Airlines, we're all saying, if you implement 5G this close to the airports, we won't be able to fly. And CNN had a report saying that 1,000 flights a day would have to be canceled because of the way that the electromagnetic pulse of the 5G internet system would impact the way airplanes actually fly, and particularly take off and land, so that there's a real danger. And in Europe, they've set standards far more severe, strict, I would say, than in the United States. The United States, of all the countries in the world, tends to be the loosest, the most permissive on technology. We talked yesterday, for example, with Vandana Shiva, one of the most brilliant public intellectuals of our time, excuse me, about the GMOs, about the genetically modified organisms. And in India and around the world, they have strict laws that keep genetically modified organisms out of the agricultural domain for the most part. Yet here in the United States, we have surrendered to technology. We have surrendered to scientific exploration virtually without restraint. And there are few places in the country, Marin County. Rick was just telling me that Marin County may be one of the few, if not the only county in the entire United States that has said no to 5G. Well, that's an extraordinary statement, particularly when you consider the health effects of the 5G technology on all of our bodies. Because when you're beaming electromagnetic pulses into your body that the human bodies haven't had to deal with in the entire history of evolution on planet Earth, it's absolutely predictable that there's going to be unknown effects on human health. And so genetically modified organisms are the same thing. I was always struck when I was learning about the GMOs that you take a cat or a dog or a cow and you give them grain or some food that is natural and some food that has GMOs, and they will not eat the GMO by instinct, they know that genetically modified food is not good for you. With the 5G, obviously, the situation is more nuanced and subtle. We have become so dependent on technology that we have made 5G a global demand. There was no demand for genetically modified organisms. Those were just thought up by the agribusiness companies in their relentless effort to control and subdue nature through pesticides and through bioengineering. So that was nothing that the public was demanding. That was something that was actually foisted on the public by major corporations seeking new ways to make profits. But 5G's is much more complicated because it's responding as much to public demand for smooth internet and increasingly dimensionalized internet. Let me give you an example. Here on Humanity Rising, we are now considering moving to Zoom events. And Zoom events, which Zoom is now developing, is next generation internet technology that will allow you to interact with me in real time, to interact with the speakers, to break into small groups, to access additional learning material. And it's very exciting. If any of you are familiar with Shindig, for example, you can do everything from sell tickets, create conference rooms, have receptions, let people meet with each other, do almost anything you can do in real time, in virtual time, in terms of interactivity. Well, that requires at least 4G, if not 5G. So our technology is both our servant but also our master. And as master, the effects of the technology are unknown for the most part, but there are now several thousand scientific studies that show that the electromagnetic field and force of 5G is going to do serious damage to human health. We can even look at the vaccines. Again, you have big corporations developing a technology, in this case, to put poisons in the body to kill germs. We all want health. So there's a whole theory around killing the germs. And so the vaccines have a utility, just like 5G. They can protect you, but there's also side effects. And so the side effects are very seldom emphasized because the government, scientific exploration, corporate imperative, they want these products to be in the market and embraced by the public. You remember when smoking was considered healthy? The corporations had doctors trundling on TV telling you that smoking was affirmatively healthy. And it took decades before the Surgeon General of the United States finally declared that cigarette smoking causes cancer. But that was a long struggle. We saw with the opiates, with the big pharmaceutical companies, saturating the market with OxyContin and saying it was good as a mood stabilizer, it was good for your overall health. And then all of a sudden you had an epidemic of addictions. and all the negative implications of addiction across America. But there was a relentless campaign by those pharmaceutical companies to insist that OxyContin was an appropriate and legally mandated drug, until the evidence against it was so overwhelming that even the government had to step in. And there were massive lawsuits that were exacted and money paid out to the victims. So if you look back over the last 50 years, we humans in our relentless development of modernity, we have sacrificed ourselves in terms of our health, our basic fundamental health, in ways that are starting to exact a toll. Let me give you an example. In the 1970s, the United States, for example, was considered the healthiest country in the world by the standards of that time. But beginning in the 1980s, when we were bringing a lot of this technology, including endocrine disrupting chemicals, endocrine disrupting chemicals or chemicals that are synthetically made by the major corporations. They mimic natural chemicals, but when they come into the body, they do incredible damage to the body in terms of genetic mutations, in terms of all kinds of adverse health effects. It's a known fact, for as another example, that the average human body has 700 to 1,000 chemicals in our body that did not exist in the human body 100 years ago, 75 years ago. All the processed foods, all the junk food, all the fertilizers on our foods, all the vaccinations we've been taking in, all the internet, the power lines, that has an effect on our bodies. And now in 2022, the United States, for example, ranks at the bottom of the industrialized world in terms of health. Between 55 and 60% of all the children in America have chronic diseases, autoimmune diseases, ADHD, childhood diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. Even the IQs of the American public have been going down. And we have ailments and diseases and maladies that are unknown in human history, that are now epidemic around the world, and particularly in the United States, which has been the most promiscuous with regards to the development of technology generally, bioengineering, et cetera. So there's a very deep question that all of us need to engage in as we embrace our iPhones and open up our computers every day, to just think, what's the cost to me as I spend 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day in front of this computer that I've become addicted to? And in fact, so addicted to that I can't conceive of my life without my computer. And I include myself in that. All of us are in this. 80% of the clothes that we wear, the technology, our medicines are all based on fossil fuels. So we're in it. All of us are in this conundrum of health, protecting our basic health from the technology that we also embrace to do what we think we need to do in our modernity. And so that's one reason why, we have been emphasizing health, and we're going to, in fact, be developing over the next several months a whole program on regenerative health, and emphasizing, as we did just a few weeks ago with Russell and Suki Munzel, just natural ways that we can fortify our immune systems, that we can exercise better, and we can have better nutrition, we can deepen our meditative practice. And so if there's a message that I wanted to bring through today in my conversation with Gary, and I apologize that he has had technical difficulties and couldn't join, is that as we consider what we use to give us the lifestyle to which we've now become accustomed, we should always think, what is this doing to my body? How is this adversely affecting my health? Is there another way to sustain health? And in this regard, I want to talk about the legacy, the scientific legacy that has so powerfully informed modern medicine and modern health. You remember Louis Pasteur. Before Louis Pasteur, there really wasn't a notion of germs. There wasn't really a clear notion of how people kind of get sick and what you do to cure them. And it was Louis Pasteur, using the first microscopes, that realized that if you look down into the body and into the cells, you could see these little bugs, you could see these little microbes. And many of the microbes were germs. So that gave rise to a whole body of both theory, but also practice, that the way to ensure human health is to go after those little germs, kill the germs. You have to, in some way, you put a poison in the body to kill the germ. A contemporary of Pasteur's was another French scientist called Beauchamp. And he said, no, it's not about killing the germs. It's about how do you sustain the overall health of the body in such a way that the body takes care of the germ. And he called this a theory, he called it miasma, that the whole body is a miasm, he said. And the more you develop the overall health of the body, the natural regenerative health of the body, which Dr. Stephanie Mines, an immunologist, was talking about just last week, the extraordinary capacity of our own bodies to develop antibodies and develop immune responses, but you have to cultivate and nurture the whole body. That's what's essential here. So it's not about putting poisons into the body to kill a germ, said Beauchamp. It's about nurturing the whole health of this entire system, and then the system will cure the ailment. And there may be specific cases where, for example, surgery is needed or some kind of intervention is needed, but that should be the exception, said Beauchamp, not the rule. And there was a great debate in Europe and the United States about these two theories. And it is said that on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur said, I was wrong. It's not about the germ. it's about the body. Beauchamp was right. But the companies could, by focusing on the germ, could build products, and the preponderance of Western medicine since Louis Pasteur has been about how do you kill the germ? Very little about how you fortify the body. And that's one reason why big pharma, the major medical establishments, are locked into this Pasteurian framework of killing germs. And those medical professionals who are wanting to fortify the whole body are considered alternative. But it's just worth noting that from the beginning of history, Chinese medicine, Greek medicine, Indian medicine with the Ayurvedic approach has always been about how you fortify the health of the body. It was only with the rise of technology, only with the rise of modern scientific reductionism, that the approach shifted from generating human health to going after those little bugs, killing the germs. And that's, of course, the basis of all the vaccinations. You put something into the body that goes and it kills something and sets up an immune response. In some cases, that's probably useful. No doubt about it. When I was a kid in Taiwan, they had cholera epidemics. So we got vaccinated against cholera. That was important. But since the 1980s and 90s in the United States, where there's no cholera and very few infectious diseases back in the 1970s, now over 16 vaccines are mandated for everyone in America. And it is no longer possible not to do them. And the effects of that have been significant. And we all need to take this in. So I will leave it for now. But my general comment, which I think all of us should consider, again, using 5G as the filter, the prism through which we look at technology, is to really understand in our time, in the 2020s, that we've become completely dependent on medical, pharmaceutical, technical infrastructures that allow us to do a lot of things, but they exact a toll on our health and well-being, such that chronic diseases now are an epidemic around the world. And at some point through the democratic process, it is imperative that we have the courage to look our technology in the eye and ask the fundamental question: is this worth it? Are there other ways to do this? And I guess as a final thought, I just want to offer a book that I'm reading called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber. And I recommend this book to all of you, The Dawn of Everything. And in the book, he shows that when the Europeans came to the New World, they didn't find sort of noble savages, as Rousseau articulated, the French intellectual of the 18th century. they found people that were so sophisticated in their philosophy of life and their politics and their embrace of individual autonomy within a communal holding of every individual, that the debates that went on between the indigenous peoples in North America and the European intellectuals that came over, and even in Europe, gave rise to a whole new understanding that challenged them in very, very fundamental ways. And I have this deep intuitive sense that when we come to the end of our experience with technology, and like with 5G, we weigh the benefit and the cost, the conclusion that common sense people will make will be that the indigenous peoples were right. That there are ways to be human that Western civilization knows not of, that our market economies know not of, that our technologies, for all their sophistication, know not of. And that it is through embracing a more primitive way of understanding the body as holistically healthful, through a more indigenous way of understanding the relationship between humanity and the natural ecosystem, which Vandana Shiva spoke so passionately and eloquently about yesterday, that we will find our pathway through the thicket of technologies that are actually killing us and eroding the very nobility of our humanity. And so it's within that thought that I would like to bring this now to a close, in the spirit of truth pursued, not truth possessed, so that we all just question what we're doing a little bit more deeply and open ourselves to different pathways of the heart through which, if we tread, will lead us to a deeper alignment with our precious planetary ecology, which will give birth to a new humanity predicated on principles that aren't currently being utilized in our modern world. So thank you, everyone.
Hey, Jim.
I want to say
Jim?
This has been sort of free associational.
Jim?
Yeah, Rick?
Gary Knoll is joining. He's trying to get here, and maybe in between, Michael Bronstein is one of the participants who wrote the book, The World on Fire. You might see what Michael's comments are. I could open up his mic if you would like to join us.
Sure. Bring Michael on. And I've opened up this topic, Michael. And if Rick can bring you on, would love to hear your comment.
Just give me a second here. Okay, Jimmy's promoted and Matt's working on Gary getting in. So we'll keep you posted.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for your patience today. Sometimes technology happens. But Michael Bronstein is the author of World on Fire, and it's an amazing book. Michael, are you with us?
Michael, would you turn your camera on and your mic, please?
Yeah, turn your video on and
I see.
take yourself off mute. There you go. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed your rollout of programs for a long time already, Jim. And this one is very close to what I've been thinking about for a long time, you know, and World on Fire. I mean, my most recent book is called Let's Burn the Flags of All Nations, but World on Fire came out in 2002 after my involvement with the International Forum on Globalization with Vandana, actually, among many others, around 99 and 2000. And just beginning to realize what we were up against then is actually what we're up against now. I mean, everything you talked about in terms of 5G was already in certain ways in place. You know, the reason I mentioned World on Fire was in World on Fire, I have a section about Béchamp and Pasteur.
Uh-huh.
And I tried to make it clear that Pasteur didn't come out of nowhere. You know, the entire social Darwinism in the 19th century, which was connected to the rise of capitalism, saw the outside as a constant threat. So, and also turning people into slaves or virtual slaves on some level with the rise of industrialism also turned them into enemies. I mean, if you stop the commons starting in the late 18th century and in the early 19th century, you make all those people who were living self-sufficient lives out in the country, you make them totally poor, you take their children, you put them into cotton mills or whatever in London, and you work them to death, they're not going to be happy about it. And so they're going to start certain revolutions during the 19th century that those in power are going to resist. And that's a threat coming from the outside. And Pasteur picked up on that with his idea of germs invading us from the outside, you know, rather than someone like Zach Bush or many others talking, or Béchamp talking about that it's the terrain that determines our health. And when the terrain, which is our own body, gets out of whack, the microbiomes, the thing that he saw that couldn't be destroyed in the body mutates, as it were, into germs, into what we call germs.
Yeah.
And so, but of course, Pasteur just saw the threat from outside. And he did say on his deathbed that he ruined Béchamp's career, but he did say on his deathbed that Béchamp was right. In another way of saying it, he said, yes, the terrain is real.
Yeah.
But it was a little too late for the pasteurization of milk and everything else. You know?
Well, Michael, thank you for your contribution. I see that Gary, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Oh, fantastic.
Here he is. So I'll let him take over. You guys take over if you will.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Michael. Let's stay in touch. I'd like to get you back on.
Definitely. Thank you.
So everyone, I'd like to introduce Gary Knoll. Gary, I introduced you at the beginning, and we've been sort of waiting for the technology to catch up. Many of you know Gary. He's the author of over, I think it's 70 plus best-selling books. He's done, I think, over 100 documentaries of one kind or another, 30, 40 of which have been on PBS. So he's deeply versed in, I would say, the general domain of human health and well-being. And it was an article that he and Rich Gale wrote about 5G a couple of weeks ago that motivated me to be in touch with Gary and invite him on Humanity Rising. So Gary, I've given a general sense about 5G, but why don't we start, just share with all of us, what electromagnetic pulses and fields are and why they are deleterious to the human body and to human health. And then I think people would benefit from just a general foundational survey, and then we'll talk about the specifics of 5G.
Sure, I'd be happy to, and thank you once again for inviting me on. Our body is biochemical. It is also bioelectrical. Virtually every single action in the body requires an electrical charge. Right now, about every 8 to 10 seconds, my eyes will blink, yours will blink, everybody watching will blink. That's necessary. Otherwise, you couldn't create a tier or a shield between the roughness of the eyelid and the inside of the eyelid and the eye. You would chafe. In effect, you would rub your eye raw. We were never taught to do this. I'm sitting down. As a result, my pulse rate will drop. If I were to lie down, it would drop even further. My metabolism at night, when I'm in a catabolic state, generally between 11 and 4, 11 at night, 4 in the morning, it will drop by as much as 10%. The body goes through, without anyone telling it, was never taught, never learned, that you have to go from an anabolic state, building up energy, to a catabolic state, resting and recovery, in effect, cleansing and detoxification. We have anywhere between 50 to 75 trillion cells. Every 24 hours, there's approximately 12,000 gene alterations, meaning damage is done 12,000 times per cell every day to every cell in the body. We must understand that virtually every single one of these 50 to 75 trillion cells are operating every microsecond of the day. Your liver is processing both the capacity to take in nutrients and break them down so they can be assimilated. You cannot just take vitamin B6, pyridoxine. It must be broken down into pyridoxal 5-phosphate. You don't just take in ascorbic acid. It has to be broken down to ascorbate. Everything has to be converted by the liver into the specifics of what the cell will actually absorb and use. The cells work in a magnificent way. 3 o'clock in the morning, you're dead asleep, and suddenly you hear something. Immediately, your heart rate increases, your hearing increases, your vision acuity increases, your smell and taste increase, your muscles prepare to flee or fight. There's a combination of both glycogen, stored glucose, and available glucose. Now, normally, if you were to wake up, well, you wouldn't wake up very fast. You'd wake up, you'd stretch a little bit. It would take you a while to get into that. Cortisol, the stress hormone, catecholamines, norepinephrine, these are some of the hormones that immediately turn on a 5-alarm fire alarm. Get up now. What's remarkable about all this? I'll throw a few more in. I go outside. I'm in Florida today. It'll be about 83 degrees. My body will start to cool itself. If I went out just 2 nights ago, it was 38 degrees. My body had to warm itself. How did it know exactly how to cool the body, how to heat the body, how to conserve heat, and how to release heat? But it did. If you eat chicken, it'll digest differently than tofu. If you eat brown rice, it'll digest differently than sugar. Why? How does it know to do that? It's always interesting when I speak with people who are so embedded into the scientism, the ultra-orthodox cult-like mindset that everything is biomechanical, everything can be degraded down to either a numerical probability or a definite and absolute understanding of cause and effect. What it leaves out of the equation in every instance is the mind, which is never located. No scientist ever determined where is the mind, and also the spirit, or what we call intuition, the knowing, the gestalt. How did I know the answer before I even realized there was a question? In that context, when I sit across from someone, and I sit across from nearly 65,000 people that I've counseled, 50 clinical studies with over 100,000 people, over, 151 studies when I was a senior research fellow at the Institute of Applied Biology and Anti-Aging Medicine, how was I able to understand the real causes of disease? Because I understood that there was something else happening in every single body that was in no textbook, none. Now, this is a long way of getting to the question you asked. But without this kind of understanding of the larger picture, without the larger context, virtually all information is functionally limited. If I said, well, here are the 5 things that you shouldn't do with a 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G, and 1G appliance, whether it's Wi-Fi, because it's pulsating into the brain, and every one of those cells is being hyper damaged, much like radiation gives us a particular type of free radical. It's called a hydroxyl free radical. It doesn't just end in a matter of a quarter of a second, a split second. It keeps going and going and going, and hence radiation damage can last long after a normal free radical has come and gone in a split second. And that's why people frequently will get rid of a cancer in the moment, but then a year later it comes back. And this time they generally die from it because their immune system was virtually used up the first time around, trying to protect you not from the cancer, but from the treatment. And we can honestly say today with accuracy that at least 50% of people dying are dying from the treatment, not the cancer per se. So then why don't we have a different way of approaching cancer? Because the mindset is that there's only one truth, and it is inviolate. You cannot challenge orthodoxy. And virtually all of science today is orthodoxy, which is the ironic part, because when science becomes orthodox, it ceases to be science. It becomes something else. And virtually all the sciences today, all the medical models that come from this science are really faux science. We call it medical science. When Anthony Fauci says, get your vaccines, get again, get the booster, get it again, and everything will be fine. And then we find out it's not. Anywhere in the world, we have a worldwide experiment showing it's wrong. Yesterday, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine released a report, the most definitive to date, showing that all of the stay-at-home, quarantine, wear masks, don't go out, social distance, and wait till you're so sick that your lips turn blue, and then go to a hospital ICU, and then get remdesivir. And that's what's been given from day one. Was this a major drug? No. One study, they ended it after a month because 25% of all the people on it died. But who's promoting Anthony Fauci? It's his drug. I see. Well, what about drugs we know will work? Like, let's say monoclonal antibodies. No, let's ban them. Let's make it impossible for people to get. But it was helping people. It was getting them help. Doesn't matter. That's political science. So today we don't have real medical science in any of the major areas of our life. We have political science. And political science is a cult. It is not based on intellect or reason. Any of the current people advocating for our current medical paradigms, whether it's statins for lowering your cholesterol or chemotherapy, almost all the chemotherapy for really helping the disease process into remission, for all the anti-inflammatories, the COX-2 inhibitors like Vioxx that only killed 100,000 people, only 100,000. Well, why didn't they change? Why did not a single rheumatologist, why did not a single cardiologist, why did not a single neurologist say, hold on, depression and anxiety are not due to a deficiency of Vioxx, or, let's say Paxil, Prozac, Effexor. No, and cancer is not due to a deficiency of chemotherapy, and yet they're actually advocating for types of immunochemotherapy for prevention and statins for prevention. So how in the world did we get to where we want to create a preventative program that is actually used therapeutically, but can actually cause the very disease you're trying to prevent? That's when all of science has lost its mind. That's why all the commentators who are broadcasting this are sycophants. They are the lowest type of intellect that we can have, the bottom feeders, who wouldn't understand Immanuel Kant from Francis Bacon. They don't understand history. They refuse to look at it because, just like the person says, everything, as a skeptic, everything can be easily deduced. Well, then tell me how prayer can help people recover when they don't know they're being prayed for. They can't answer that. They simply dismiss it. And tell me how my eyes knew to blink. No one taught it. Tell me how every organism in the body is not based upon cause and effect per se, but based upon the reason of integrated, interrelated, cooperative communication between cells that are only supposed to know what to communicate and how to communicate when they've been taught something. But we're more than a Pavlovian dog responding to a bell, to salivate, to be able to get the food that we want. So we have skipped over the most single important aspect of knowledge, of healing. We don't do anything to heal in our society. Everything we do, at least 90, 97, well, 93% of all people every day, every choice they make is a choice that's wrong. Everything they eat, who they vote for, what they accept, what they reject, opportunities they choose not to take. And then one day we see a mess, a human mess. And the very people who help participate in profiting from this mess are the ones who are then told, we will help you. Here's your solution. So you see, trust nothing until you can independently validate that it's true. So when I'm working with people, I'm working starting at a different point. Because there's nothing worse than waking up one day in life and realizing that all of your choices have led you to the wrong destination. But your goal was to get to that destination. How you got there, what tools you used became immaterial. And so lying, deception, betrayal, lack of ethics, not cooperating with our better sense of self and our spiritual values. We all had those. Because just like the capacity for one cell to communicate with another, cells never work against you. Now imagine that. 50 trillion entities, all with a conscious purpose, will work cooperatively even when you're working against them. You smoke, you drink, you eat sugar, you give excuses for everything, you're glib, you're sarcastic, you're smart aleck, you're wise ass, and you win. You just won't like your trophy. Your trophy is disease, separation, bankruptcy, death, isolation, loneliness. But if you open up a different door and you realize, is this the path I should take based upon what I want to achieve? It's a different outcome. For example, if I want to be a good neighbor, then I have to actualize it. I have to go to my neighbors and say, neighbor, what can I do to help you in any way that I can? It's reasonable. Now, they may not need our help. They may not want our help. But that's not important. It's important that you realize you have a spiritual obligation to pass the gift on. If you can help someone in some way, you have an obligation to do so. And that's why when I go to a movie or go downtown and I'm walking, I always take extra cash. I put it in my pocket because I want to talk and hear a person's story. I want to hear where they came from. I want to hear how did they get on the street and are homeless. I want to know, what are they doing to try to reclaim their life and reverse this predicament? What lessons have they learned? And then I will help the person to the degree I can. But we can all help someone. But what if we haven't helped ourselves? What if we haven't availed our own healing capacity for self-healing? So this takes me back to a simple process. In 1971, I realized that letting a person know that you really cared about the success of their journey, I decided never to talk about disease, ever. As a result of someone who was in front of me with diabetes, it wasn't just, okay, you got to take chromium picolinate and you got to take, no, I didn't go that route. And I never have. Instead, I asked, what is missing in your life that you're overeating or eating wrongly or making bad choices has taken the place of a right decision. And they stop for a moment. And then they start filling in the void of the dark side of their being. And then we work from that. Because you can't change unless you turn, be honest, and address the crisis in our life that we have not resolved, learning to let go of things we can no longer control and set them free, and to be able to understand the lessons of our crisis. Because otherwise, every positive attribute, and everyone has positive attributes, every one of us are always going to be limited to the degree that we have unresolved conflicts. So then, instead of working on just this over here, the good part, I start by working on the dark side. And by helping a person understand how do we get to this dark place, maybe we're young and had no capacity to change it, then what are the consequences? How does that follow us every day? How does that impact epigenetically, our choices? And how do we then go in a circle where one day after a year or a decade, we end up seeing the back of our head saying, I've been here before. Yeah. So how do we prevent that from happening? So we work on the crisis, you work on the problem, you work on the dark side, and that liberates you to now you start to master the healing process, the joy process. The basis of all healing is happiness. You can't be healthy if you're not happy. And everybody'd like to think that's not true. It is true. When you're not happy 24/7, you're producing disease. You're stressing yourself. You're making wrong choices. We can later understand why we made these choices, but it doesn't stop us in the moment. Self-actualization does. So I took a group of scientists in 1971, and I said, I just want you to observe this. I don't want your emotions a part of it. I don't want your beliefs a part of it, because all of your beliefs are extremely controlled. You have codified your emotions. And hence, I'm the strange guy who works up on the third floor and never using vivisection, never hurting an animal, but helping learn how we can heal and using our mind, but also using the right foods and juices, etc. And these people are your regular scientists, all highly academically trained, one from University of Pasteur and Columbia, etc. And they were doing cancer research, all sponsored by Big Pharma. And I was doing the anti-aging research. And so I said, what do some of the oldest living people in history have in common? I'm talking about people, even the signers' Declaration of Independence, the average age of a colonist at that time compared to today, you're talking about almost a 30-year difference. Well, why did one person live to be 98? Why did John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both die on the same day, 50 years after signing the Declaration of Independence? That's kind of an interesting coincidence. And they were pen pals. And what did they do differently? Because unless you look at the anomaly, you're just then looking at the herd. You're not looking at the outliers who may have something we can benefit from. So I took a group of mice. In fact, I'd gotten them from Dr. Sugiura at Sloan Kettering. And I said, these mice are going to die in 22 days from ascites tumors. If I bring in people who do not touch the mouse, and you're there, and you see they're just doing some form of meditation or prayer, but if those mice, cancer is gone, not just once, because you can say, well, there's an anomaly, but 6 out of 6 times, and that meets every classical definition of a reproducible outcome. They agreed. So I brought in 50 people who claimed they had been able to work with people using just their spiritual energy. Rabbi Abraham Wiseman from Brooklyn, Dr. Thomas Caruth, Order of St. Luke, Dr. Morton Jacobs, Catherine Coleman, Olga Worrell, a very well-known televangelist, the head of nursing at New York University, Dolores Krieger, Dr. Audrey Carger. So the 50 people, after the first go through, 6 were able to completely eliminate cancer I have photographs. You can see this. You go on GaryNoll.com. You'll see this all in the lab coach. And you'll see Dr. Dolores Krieger, head of nursing at New York University, and she's, there she is with her mouse number 37. And so we did it 6 times. In 6 out of 6 times, they were able to cure the cancer. But then I wanted to see, did it work in other areas? Because the universe does not hold partial truths. We believe in partial truths, but the universe has a whole truth that we rarely ever look at. So you can't have someone who can heal a mouse of cancer and not be able to also heal humans, or also to use that energy in ways that is a healing. So we would go into a room with 2 groups of sprouts, identical lighting, fertilizing, from the same batch. In this group, you see them, when they would go in and meditate over the sprouts just grew fast. In this group, grew normally. We would cut enzymes. They would meditate, reconnect the enzymes. This took about 3 years. I finally published the results in the Journal of Psychotronic Research, and as well as Human Nature. But it was this, I didn't do it because the lab felt it was too esoteric. It might harm the funding because it was out of the bounds of cancer research. And I said, to the contrary, imagine if you added just one more aspect of a cancer therapy of prayer by people who believe strongly in the power of prayer healing or meditation, but they didn't want anything to do with that. Anyhow, but it taught me something very important, that the environment in which you live, the entirety, is a constantly moving environment. So when we're aware of that environment and ourselves in it, when we're aware of the trees that we're with or the grass under our feet, when we're aware of the air, and then we're part of the Gaia, that we're part of the whole of life, where today everything is just cut and dice, stay here, live there, work there, talk with that person, don't talk with that person. Your life is a series of systemic rituals. If you're the average person, and the average person does not ever deal with major problems, they rely upon governmental agencies or the so-called experts to guide them. And unfortunately, even guiding them over a cliff doesn't seem to get the message through. So when I take a look at what is possible, and by the way, today you've heard of therapeutic touch. Every nurse in America, every nursing school is taught that. That came from Dolores Krieger, that came from the study. All right. So the unintended consequences was it spread in different ways out. So in everybody that I work with, I start off with the idea of what is in your life on any level that could be blocking your healing energies. Is it unresolved issues? It is rage, anger? Is it fear, insecurity, uncertainty? Dealing with that has an enormous positive outcome. And then start putting into your environment all of the pulsed energy, the energy we feel. When you look in your partner's eyes and think back to where you started your relationships, you thought about them all day long. You couldn't wait to see them. You couldn't wait to just lose yourself into their energy. That's real. When a mother picks a baby up and kisses it, she's bonding with it, but also the mother's lips is touching the baby's lips. The mother is picking up anything on that baby's lip, taking it back into her body, and then her body is automatically creating antibodies to it and putting it through the breast milk. So the greatest vaccination, immunization in the world is breast milk. Something that we never talk about, how this magnificence, how would the body know? Who taught it? Who taught it? Every mother in the world, kiss your baby and watch, then give it breast milk and watch this cycle occur. But it does. How does the body tell us you've slept 8 hours? Wake up. How does it do that? When you go out to run, how does the body know? Okay, your heart's going at 130 beats a minute. That's maximum. Slow down, cool off. All right, now it's at 100. Now let's bring it back to 60 where it's normal. Who taught it to do that? No scientist can answer that. You will not find the answer in medicine or science, but you'll find it in quantum physics and spiritual thinking. So you see, we have not used enough of the tools. Now, to bring it into the 5G, we're told through childish cartoons and commercials that 5G connects us to everything. And don't you want everything to go faster, where you can get a movie up on your cell phone or computer in a second? Why is that important? What's the side effect of that? Well, we now know today that by just wearing your cell phone in your pocket, men, you're destroying your sperm cells. The average guy says, so what? I don't care. But what if you want to have a family? And what if defective sperm due to 5G, 4G, and 3G end up causing the connection between the electromagnetic pulse? Remember, where's that coming from? It's being beamed from a satellite, thousands of satellites. We were told we had 52,000 satellites. Now we're told we have over 400,000 satellites. These are beaming down to these little stations, high intensity beams. These then go to the cell phones in that area, and they can go to different cell towers. Almost every block has buildings with them, where they'll go. Then you can, depending upon the power of your cell phone, is how much energy you're bringing in. None of it's constructed. In fact, Panorama, which is part of the British television system, I think it's BBC, they did a documentary and someone sent it to me. I watched it. It's about 24 minutes long. And it showed pro cell phone people, pro 5G and Wi-Fi. They took a meter that read the electromagnetic pulses that are coming off Wi-Fi, and they went into a school. Now, let's say I'm at my desk and a computer's about maybe 24 inches away from me. So they measure from where the student is sitting what the amount of electromagnetic pulses. It was in the danger area. So they got up and they started walking backwards and walking out. They had to walk out the school and across the parking lot before it was no longer in the danger area. That means that an entire school and everyone in it, every day, every second, is being overwhelmed with electromagnetic pulses. This in turn can create a whole new type of environmental diseases, fatigue, confusion, destroying neurons, breaking the dendrites in the brain, the connective lines that take you from cell A to cell B, interfering with synaptic activity, overstimulating the central nervous system. Every single school has Wi-Fi. When you get in an airplane, every single seat has Wi-Fi. And yet, not once are we told that there are over 10,000 studies showing its danger. Thousands of scientists have come forward to show its danger. I have all their testimony, or at least all that I could find before Senate hearings, state hearings, and yet not a single negative comment in any media at all about 5G. So then you see that stupid little ad where the person comes in with a little kind of cut out hands and, oh, is this the fastest? Oh, yes, the fastest. And will this do this and this and this? Oh, yeah. So everyone comes away thinking, wow, 5G is just the best. It's the worst. And we're going to see a pandemic of environmentally induced electromagnetic pulse illnesses in the coming future because it's going to be everywhere. And as a result, smart meters already a problem because they're giving a huge amount of this. I'll give you an example. There is an award-winning journalist. I will not mention this person's name because they're working for a network. And they called me one day and said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm losing weight. I can't focus. I can't write. I've got migraine headaches. I've got aches and pains all over my body. And I said, go to a diagnostician and get a series of tests taken. Came back, nothing in her diet. They can't pinpoint it. They can't say, this is what you've got. So it's almost idiopathic of unknown origin. I said, by any chance, did you have a smart meter put into your apartment building? He said, I don't know. Go down and check. Well, sure enough, there's a smart meter. I said, now there's a meter you can buy. It's not expensive. Everyone should own one. And it's like you go right up and it'll tell you exactly whether how much of electromagnetic pulse is coming off on you. And I've done it right here. I've got a monitor here. I've got, my Zoom camera right there, about 5-6 feet in front of me. I have no other electromagnetic pulses, and I've scanned this 100 times. It's completely safe. But what if I put one of those phones in my ear? Then it's not safe. What if I'm a teenager, I'm sleeping with the phone right beside my pillow or under my pillow so I can look at it multiple times? Then that's pulsing nonstop, 24/7 into your brain. So I said, get rid of the 5G or the smart meter. And she said, well, they don't want to take it out. I said, well, no, you have a right to have it out. They put one in my house here while I was on tour. I came back, found it. I had them take it out, put back the old analog. In any case, she was not able to get it out of the building. She's not the only one in the building. And so I said, then move out of the city, go to the suburbs or someplace where you can see that there's no transmitter around you. And she did. And within 2 weeks, everything began to change, clear up. So she is one of the many millions of people who will now be suffering, unless they're careful, from this. So our conveniences of having the internet, having cell phones. I turn my cell phone on once a week when I go to the farmer's market for 2 hours on a Saturday morning. I don't turn it on at any other time because I don't need it. I'm not on Facebook. You might find this interesting. 7 years ago, I would have between 7 to 8 million people a day on Facebook. I just say goodbye, don't want to be on part of the internet. And I went off, never went on Twitter, never Twittered anything. And I'm off the grid completely. My house is solar powered, put in my own wells. I have my own biodynamic garden and hydroponics and sprouts. And to the degree that I can get away from all this, I do, which I suggest other people do as well. Even planting aromatic plants around your apartment in pots like lavender, lilac, jasmine, chrysanthemum, roses that bloom in the evening. So you get this wonderful cacophony of smells coming up all night. It just gives you such a peaceful place to be. You could do it outside your house, outside of your bedroom window. Also, you can make these little ornamental gardens. So we have to start realizing that the highly mechanistic life that we've been encouraged to live is dangerous to us. But it all starts with energy. Everything in your life is energy. And what is the only thing that's missing when you're dead? Your eyes, your heart, your liver, your lymph, it's all there. The only thing that's gone is energy. The one thing that's never taught in any medical school or any scientific class, the beginning of life. When we know that energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be reformed. We never create energy. We'll use energy to create energy. Hydroelectric, water and turbines create electric energy. Solar, wind, geothermal, wave. We have to have energy to create energy, but we've never created energy. We've only used that which has already been present. So understand that the meaning and purpose or the foundation of all life is energy. So as long as you keep bringing in positive thoughts, challenge yourself intellectually, creatively, spiritually, by doing, not just thinking. Life isn't meant to be lived like an ascetic. It's meant to be lived dynamically by understanding, bring in the positive energy, surrender the negative energy, let it go with peace and love, not with anger and disdain. Go from being outraged, which is legitimate, and surrendering rage. Look at what you can do when you think of solutions, live by solutions, then everything is a solution. And that's positive. If you think only about the problem and how you're a victim of everything, then now your whole life is a grid of negative energy pulses. And we all know it. How many times has a mother or father said, "What's wrong?" You say, "Nothing." "Well, something's wrong." "No, nothing's wrong." They were right. Something was wrong, right? And because they know, because they have that open channel, because it's maternal, they're harmonizing their life energy with yours, because your life energy is also forever your mother's life energy and your father's. Therefore, they will feel that spiritual energy and they can read it. And then it's for them to interpret it with you. So if you surround yourself with positive energy and you keep focusing upon the solutions to every problem, then you're engaged in thinking positively, because you can only find solutions when you're positive. Think positive, eat positive, have friendships that are positive, have relationships that are positive. Love yourself and think, okay, I'm about to eat something. Am I eating something that every one of my cells will say thank you for? So when you live that kind of life, then life no longer is limited to the confinements of an artificial construct that we've been taught to live by. And right now, virtually everything in our life is an artificial construct. Hope that answers your first question.
More than answers it, Gary. Thank you so much. I just need to ask you about the vaccines. We're now in a world where vaccines increasingly are being mandated in order to move about. We're now being confronted by boosters. And I think our audience would just welcome your own approach to health in a time of COVID. But start with your sense of the utility and dangers of vaccines.
Good. I'm just going to do one thing for 1 second. I have a light on in front of me, and it's a little bright to my eyes.
Sure.
I don't want to squint, so I'm just going to unplug it. Thank you for your patience there. Okay. Virtually every single person that I've interviewed in the last 2 years is pro-vaccine. Robert F. Kennedy, Dr. Malone, all the top people who are challenging some aspect of the current paradigm. And paradigm is paradigma, pattern, meaning someone comes up with an idea and then convinces other people the rightness of the idea. It may or may not be right. But then once they find that something is invested in them being a part of the paradigm, they're getting a reward for simply complying. And it was F. Somerset Maugham, great essayist, who said, never allow the public behind the curtain, for it was the illusion that they loved, not the reality. So everything today has become an illusionary dance with pixie dust. We're taught to comply and be rewarded for our compliance. That all truths will be given to us. We don't have to search for any ourselves. That if they're going to tell you you can prevent disease, they will not tell you about lifestyle or overcompensating for, let's say, defective genes or family traits. They will not talk about the epigenetics, the larger environment, the genes, how for 7 generations back, whatever was dealt with to your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, et cetera, you're now carrying that energy. Now, that doesn't mean that will automatically mean that you will respond as they did. Free will and understanding how to deal with something reasonably instead of reactionarily. So we either react to a situation or we reason with it. To reason, you have to go to neutral, because you cannot reason if you're already committed to an emotional event. You got to pull back and say, what is the likely outcome of what I'm about to say, or eat, or think, or do, or support, or vote for? And it's that moment of clarity that comes from an introspective mind that says, there's going to be a consequence to every action in life. What outcome do I want? What is the purpose of this exercise? So once you understand there's a purpose to every single thing you say, then think with intent. Right now, we think by reaction. As a result, about 95 to 97% of all of our thoughts every day come from reactionary stimuli, meaning something that was embedded into our subconscious that we are going to fall back on. And then someone says a word and we react to it. Instead of thinking, it's just a word. Well, why should I react to it? We react to emotions, react to situations instead of reasoning with it. If you reason with it, you have an opportunity to do the Tai Chi dance. Let what is the opposite of the ideal go through you and past you. And so we need that introspection, and we're lacking it because everything is a passive spectator phenomena. We are a nation at every level of watching people say things, do things, reality television, medicine, get your vaccines, take this pill. If you don't, then you're going to hurt yourself, and anyone tells you otherwise, they're a quack and a charlatan. So the public doesn't want to challenge authority because in our life, authority is always deferred to. You never go into a situation saying, learner, you have as much right to ask a question as the dean of the department or the chancellor of the university or the provost or the top tenured professor or the assistant or associate professor or the teacher. Now, mind you, all of them are in a hierarchical structure more significant than you, so everyone is told. And that's why each person gets a pay raise and gets more respect. The president of the United States is given more respect than a truck driver. And yet, that shouldn't be the case. Because if the truck driver had as many informed people giving them input, and that's all president does, all they do is get input all day long. They don't read, they don't understand, they don't have time for anything. It's all just a kabuki performance, political kabuki performance. And instead of wearing a traditional kabuki outfit, they should have little slogans sewed on. ExxonMobil, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia, General Electric, General Mills, because that's who actually creates the thought processes that are then interpreted by think tanks that then send forth charming, attractive, intelligent, well-credentialed spokespersons. Hence, they are the opinion leaders that then go on the shows, and then the shows say, this is the truth. Look at the person we selected. Trust us. We can get to anyone and get them on the show. So if we had all these people on and you don't hear any of these people, then these people are right and these people are wrong. So we start this self-censoring early in life. And by the time we end up with cancer, by the time we end up obese, by the time we end up in a presidential campaign, we're conditioned. We're conditioned to believe what we were told to believe, not what we discovered should be believed. As a result, most people end up succeeding. In fact, everyone succeeds. Even the homeless person on the street succeeds. Because if you or I were to go on the street tomorrow, we had no food, we had no beverage, and we see someone drinking out of a half-drunk can, you just took out of a garbage can, of a cola, or eating a half-eaten sandwich. If we did that, we would be in an emergency room with amoebic dysentery and all kinds of problems about an hour later. How can they do it? Because over time, their body has adapted to that environment, but that's over time. It's just like people coming from Mexico frequently get diarrhea here because their body's not used to, and their biome is not used to the bacterial input. And that's why we frequently get diarrhea in other countries if it's so different than our own. Well, if you're around other cultures that are so different, if you're around other ideologies that are so different than your own, the likelihood is you will not assimilate. You will be aware of it, you won't assimilate. But when you're assimilating into something, you become no longer yourself. It's much like the invasion of the body snatchers, where Person goes to bed normal one night, someone puts this pod, and overnight the pod opens up and transmutates into the person. So the person the next day looks the same, sounds the same, but isn't the same. They are a different thing. And so that's what we become. Many of the virtues that people remember growing up, as we all experienced if we grew up as baby boomers or senior citizens, those were wonderful challenges. You know, as George Carlin says that his immune system was built by swimming in the Hudson River where all that sewage was flowing. And he was right. The more you challenge your immune system, the stronger it's going to be. That's why living on a farm, I've lived on a farm, I've been an organic certified farmer and an animal sanctuary my whole adult life. When you're in barns every morning, as I am, when you're making up the food, you go into the environments, you clean the hay out, all those danders, all this bacteria, your body has to create antibody reactions to all of it. And so you can go into any environment and your whole immune system is just really strong. But if you overprotect yourself, your body's immune system, the innate immune system, is no longer as strong. You've handicapped it. And therefore you say, well, the only immune system you can get, the only one you need is from this vaccine. What about if I ate more beta carotene, had more vitamin D from the sun? What if I had more fiber, more antioxidants, more ORAC? No, that's not important. But in PubMed's peer-reviewed journal, there are hundreds of thousands of studies showing these natural nutrients really help. So you say, review the peer-reviewed journal, and I'm using peer-reviewed journal to justify my diet, a vegan, healthy, plant-based diet, drinking fresh made juices throughout the day. Beet juice, tomato juice, lower your blood pressure. So isn't that important? No, we got a pill for that. That pill has serious side effects. For the vaccines, they're safe and effective, right? All of them are safe and effective, and they're all needed, absolutely needed. Then why does a child need a hepatitis B vaccine within about 5 minutes of being born if the mother doesn't have hepatitis? It's easy enough to take an antibody test. If there's no hepatitis there, why give in a completely non-developed immune system, give something that will attack the existing cells of the body and set up a real challenge within that system? Why not allow the body to evolve naturally? But they won't do that. So then they say, but it's safe and effective, and they get it mandated. Okay. So right now, virtually everyone, whether they're taking the vaccine or not, agrees vaccines are good and safe. They haven't done their homework. I've spent over 30,000, I repeat, over 30,000 hours of scholarly research over the last 50 years reviewing vaccines. And I simply go to the toxicological peer-reviewed literature. And for example, I simply ask the following question. Are vaccines safe? Yes, they're safe. Okay, well, here are all the ingredients. Well, we got mercury there for all these decades, still in some. And methylmercury is known to be 100% destructive to neurons. In fact, there was I think it was the University of Toronto had a study where we actually saw a neuron and the introduction of the amount of mercury that would be in a normal vaccine. I think it was an H1N1 vaccine, and it immediately attacked the neuron, destroyed it. So we know that it's neurotoxic. Always. There are thousands of peer-reviewed studies showing, but then there's aluminum. Aluminum is also neurotoxic all the time. So then we have polysorbate 80, and we have formaldehyde, embalming fluid. We have dozens of different ingredients in vaccines, all of which are toxic. So then how can you say it's non-toxic? Well, because studies. Okay, you did studies. You used one vaccine against another vaccine. So how is that a real placebo-controlled study? A placebo must be inert, like a sugar pill. So did you use saline solution in, let's say, 5,000 kids, and then use an active vaccine for 5,000 kids, record all of their health parameters, at the beginning and then every 6 months for 3 years. No, you've never done that. So you have no scientific basis, no legitimacy in truth of saying that any vaccine ever created is both safe and effective. Then, so that's simply on science alone, just pure facts. It destroys the myth that vaccines are safe. But then how effective is it? Well, let's just use an example. Let's say that you give 100,000 people the flu vaccine. And then at the end of a year, you measure and that 80% of those people did not come down with the flu. In the most remarkable Machiavellian mindset, science will say the flu vaccine was 80% effective. Are you telling me that someone who took vitamin D and vitamin C was on a healthy diet, not overweight, not diabetic, and they kept their immune system strong through their lifestyle, that played no part in them not getting the flu? It was just a vaccine. That's the insanity of the entire medical industrial complex. Let's be clear. Real science, independent science, is far and few between. Mainstream science is purely corrupted at every level. So they're giving credit for a vaccine when a person does not end up with a condition, instead of looking at all the other mitigating factors that contribute to that. So then the vaccine is given credit where it shouldn't. And look at what they did with, as an example, with COVID. They said, get your vaccines and you won't get the virus and you won't spread it. It turned out to be just the opposite. Higher numbers of people are now vaccine spreaders than the unvaccinated. More people in Israel and in Denmark and in Norway are now affected. And even Japan, 80% of the total population is affected, is vaccinated with at least 2 and possibly 3 vaccines. And Israel is working on its 4th vaccine. Remember, a booster is still the same vaccine. But each time you give a vaccine to an older person, what you're doing is you're creating a response where the body is now going to produce upwards of 40 trillion spike proteins. And now when these hit those ACE2 receptors, the body is immediately going to produce antibodies 24/7 to try to destroy that. The trouble is an autoimmune condition, which about 100, almost half the population suffers some form of immunity, about 40%, about 150.5 million people. That already is an overexhausted immune system. So with each succeeding vaccine, you're taking an overextended immune system and you're pounding it to death. So it's inevitable, absolutely inevitable, that in the next 3 to 5 years, you will see a tremendous percentage of people who have taken the vaccines and boosters coming down with autoimmune reaction and destruction of their innate immune system, and they will suffer or die because of it. We're already seeing that in Israel. And finally, the chief virologist in Israel, who helped oversee all this, has come forward and said that we have to have a different program. This is not working. Good for him for saying it. He'll be silenced, even though he was the top person there with impeccable credentials, because behind all this are careers. And the careers will not, cannot, under any circumstances, acknowledge they were wrong. Because when you've had over 800,000 people die in the United States and millions upon millions worldwide, and we know now that there are hundreds of studies, I have them all, on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and monoclonal antibodies and vitamins D3 and zinc and vitamin C and quercetin and all of the extract, all this from peer-reviewed literature. And they're saying none of this is real. And we're saying, but here's you have over 35,000 scientists who've worked on hundreds of thousands of patients, publishing their results in peer-reviewed journals from respected institutions. You're saying all this is quackery, none of this existed? Even the most loathsome, self-deprecating sociopath, which seems like an oxymoron, would have to acknowledge that there's only so much you're going to be able to get away with. There's only so many times you're going to allow the public behind the curtain, and they're not going to believe you anymore. And that's why school teachers in Virginia were challenged, and the school boards were challenged by just parents who finally found out what their children were learning and how adulterated and politicized the curriculum was. And they went in there and they demanded, don't do anymore. So the Biden administration then gets the Justice Department to make that a felony. In fact, a serious felony. If you go in and challenge, even legitimately and even politely, local school board, you could now become considered domestic terrorist. So even our right to question it is now no longer present. Demonstrations in New York State are now going to be after the 14th of this month. The governor is going to sign, and require a vote, an executive order stating that anyone who represents a threat to public health can be arrested and imprisoned. So if you were to say, I'm pro-vaccine, providing it's safe and effective, but these have never been shown to be true vaccines, these are really biological implants, and I would prefer to wait until 3 or 4 years from now so we start seeing the full extent of the side effects and the deaths that you refuse to account. And Harvard said only 1% of the deaths reported, which is 20,000 deaths. So 1% is accurate and 99% were not reported. Well, just imagine if 1% of deaths is 20,000 acknowledged by the Vaccine Adverse Reporting System, the FDA, the CDC's own reporting system, and you have over 1 million government reported casualties, not fatalities, but casualties, but half of those are not upwards of, let's say, 400,000 are life permanent injuries. Then what would 99% more be? More people who have died or been injured than the First World War and the Second World War combined. And yet we banned in 1976 the vaccine, the flu vaccine, when 21 people died. Turns out there were 53 people who died, but with 20 people dying, we banned it. Now, according to Columbia University, in a report they did, they went conservative. They went 40%. Instead of 1% reporting, it was 40%. They came up with about 100, I think it was around 142,000 deaths. That's more than we lost in World War I. That's twice the casualties that we lost in the Vietnam War. And yet not a single negative comment in any publication, not the Atlantic, not Harper's, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, none of them will report on how bad the side effects are. Because then people will say, whoa, you told me this was safe. Well, it's safe, but if you're a young person, there's a chance you can get myocarditis, you can end up with inflammation of the heart, which can be permanent. And we have young people dying after taking the vaccine who were athletes playing soccer, basketball, football, and just dropping dead. And so far more people are dying from the vaccine than dying from COVID. Doesn't science show that babies and children have 0 chance of dying from COVID? That's true. That's what the science says. Then why give them the 3 vaccines? Because it's profitable. And everything today is based on profit. You can thank Fauci, Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the major corporations who see this as just pigs at a trough, gorging until they can't eat anymore. The trouble is these people have pretty good digestion systems, so we get their excrement and they get more money. It's a sickness. And shame on all American reporters who refuse to look for the truth or any scientists, but fortunately there are scientists. The Great Barrington Declaration was signed now by 500,000 or 600,000 people. Over 100,000 of those are medical doctors and scientists, including Nobel Prize winners, where they said that what we're doing is wrong. We lied about mortality. Guy got shot multiple times. It's COVID. Why? Because with COVID, you can play the system for $100,000 per patient. We used to think it was $29,000, then it was $36,000. It's $100,000. So everybody in the hospital now has COVID. No matter what. You're in a motorcycle accident, true story, it's COVID. But then the morticians start telling us the people dying, they didn't die from COVID. Now England acknowledges that the vast majority of patients going into hospital went in with heart disease, cancers, other conditions, and yet it was listed as COVID. So every way you can play the vaccine safety and efficacy angle, they've done. They don't have the science on their side. They've never done the real science. It's been proprietary science. And to show you how unethical they are, we should know right now, when you go in to get a vaccine, did they go in to the deltoid muscle and pull back to see if there's any blood? It's called aspiration. If they didn't, that means if there's blood, they went into a vein. When you put a vaccine directly into the bloodstream, that's extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. And now we found out from autopsies that the Delta didn't hold the vaccine. It went into the lymphatic system, went to every organ in the body, past the blood-brain barrier, heart, liver, etc. So it's everywhere. So we were lied to. So now independent science continue to confirm every one of these aspects over and over and over again, but nothing changes. So they've lied to you about everything, and they're going to continue lying. They lied about the origins. We now know from Freedom of Information Act documents that have been turned over that Anthony Fauci informed a group of people that this was a crisis and they had to get on it. So the majority of the people said that this almost certainly came from a lab. That same day, those same people sent out a common communique that this could not have come from nature. Two of those people received $8,500 research grant. Another received $6.5 million each. All told, over $65 million was given to those people who agreed that it didn't come from a laboratory. But then it did. It came through a man named Dr. Barrick. He was the person who was getting money from Anthony Fauci, and documents showed that he was doing gain of function research. He was doing it with North Carolina University and then Wuhan University. And so they knew what they were doing. They were weaponizing it. And they knew it. But could you imagine them having to be honest about this today? No. We will never know the full truth unless there's a whistleblower who leaves China, comes to the United States, who was at Wuhan, saw what was doing, confirms the research, and then we'll know. But until that time, the people will still be given lies. This is Luc Montagnier, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV, and he's at the Institute of Pasteur. He said that there are HIV genes in the COVID virus that couldn't have come by nature, that was implanted. There are prions in there, what cause Creutzfeldt disease or mad cow disease. Those are in there. You have two perfect alignment of amino acids that could only have come from laboratory put insertion. So scientists are now looking at this. They're saying this was lab created in Wuhan. And yet everyone's lying about it. Now, because Fauci had a long-standing relationship with the Chinese Communist Party's biological division, and the biological division is actually supervised by their defense division, and their defense top scientists talked on an open class. You can see them in a classroom of some 1,200, all told, he had 1,200 biologists working under him, that this was a gain of function research, dual use. So we have the proof, and yet the American media has protected Fauci. The deep state protects Fauci. The governmental agencies protect Fauci. And the American public still believes Fauci, even though the whole house of cards is crashing down around them. So when it comes to vaccines, never listen to anyone. Do your own homework. Because only when you do your homework, you know the truth. So when you go into a pharmacist, aren't they supposed to show you the package insert? Aren't they supposed to show you the side effects? Yes, they are. So therefore, you can make an informed consent. It's informed. Informed means you have facts. The sheet, it's blank. There's nothing on it, not a single thing on there. So then people want to know, what are all these ingredients? What's the outcome? Well, the manufacturer doesn't want to tell them. So the manufacturer goes to the FDA and says, protect us. Okay, we have hundreds of thousands of documents. Well, tell them we'll release the documents in 56 years. But then that's not good enough, 75 years. So believe it or not, the vaccine makers did not want you to know what's in their vaccines or the outcome of their studies. So they got the FDA to try to justify 75 years from now, you'll know about the true safety and efficacy of the vaccine. If they were transparent, they'd say, sure, we have it now. But that's not how the game works.
Well, Gary, wow. Thank you. What you have provided today is a tour de force on the importance of taking control over our own health, questioning authority, understanding that things are being done to us in the name of science that are deeply troubling to any kind of ethical norms and are deleterious to our health. And that I just want to underscore everyone that we honor everything in the spirit of truth pursued, not truth possessed. But in the spirit of humanity rising, I think what Gary has provided for us today is a perspective on 5G, a perspective on COVID and vaccinations that all of us need to ponder very, very deeply so that we can both understand and then take the necessary steps to ensure that we remain healthy and that we remain equally fundamentally committed to the democratic process of free inquiry of the facts and truth. So, Gary, thank you very much. We're out of time for today, but we hope to have you back down the trail.
Could I just make one short statement?
Sure.
For those who, I see some of the things coming up here. One person said to stay healthy, get your vaccine. Okay, I don't tell people to vaccinate or not. I say do your homework. Why is it that over 1,000 people who were injured after taking the vaccine, they all were on this clip, and that clip has been banned from all social media? Why is it not a single adverse reaction or a single death has been shown on the mainstream media, the consequences? So before you take a vaccine, shouldn't you know whether it's safe or not? And therefore go online and look at the actual people, see them face to face, hear their stories. Many are medical doctors, many are scientists. And so therefore, then you'll be better informed. What you do once you're informed is your choice. I don't tell people what to do. I merely show them that unless you have all the information from which to make a reasonable choice, you're almost always going to make the wrong choice. Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you end up in a hospital like a nurse who took them and had to have both legs amputated because of blood clots? Do you remember, did you see that woman who was at a big press conference to introduce the vaccines? And she came out, she's, I guess it's her late 20s, early 30s. We're here to talk about the safety of vaccines. She gets the vaccine and she's talking about 30 seconds after talking, she faints, falls on the floor, and then she dies. All right? They didn't attribute that to the vaccine. That's how much in denial they have. That's how much hubris is involved in this. When someone dies right in front of your eyes, immediately after taking a vaccine, and you say, well, it must not have been the vaccine. What else was it? Totally healthy, athletic person with no diseases, takes the vaccine, and there are tens of thousands of people like that. Read Dr. Rose's 2 articles. Go to GaryNull.com. Go to where it says articles. Scroll down on vaccines. I have over 60 I've written. They're all scholarly. As Jim will tell you, all my articles are fully documented. Richard Gale and I, we show the scholarship behind these. Now, take a look and see the untold story. So if we knew all the casualties, Dr. Rose said it's 600,000 dead Americans. That was in one study. And she's one of the world's leading authorities on this topic. She's a virologist, immunologist, and epidemiologist. Thank you, Jim, for being on today, and thank all of you for taking the time to watch this. How many people watch your videos, Jim?
Well, it goes out to tens of thousands every day, sometimes hundreds of thousands through our live streaming partners, to registered participants in over 130 countries. So we have a good global reach. It's not as big as your radio show on the Progressive News Network, but we're out there each day just trying to get people to deepen their inquiry, as you've challenged us to do, Gary, into what we're being told and what we need to really know to ensure our own health and well-being. So thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure. Hope to have you back soon. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again on Monday. Bye for now.